TopMedTalk.
Well, hello and welcome to TopMedTalk. I'm Desiree Chappell, and we are coming to you from the 5th Collaborative Clinical Trials and Anaesthesiology Meeting here in Prato, Italy. And I'm joined by Editor-in-Chief of TopMedTalk, Monty Mythen. Hello, Monty.
Hey, Desiree. Great to be here. What a privilege, eh?
Absolutely. I keep saying that I feel like I'm in this think tank of amazing individuals that are running all the clinical, not all, but running clinical trials around the globe. Will you tell our listeners just a little bit more about the meeting?
It's organised by Professor Paul Miles from Monash University, which is in Melbourne in Australia. So the question then would be, what are we doing in Prato in Italy, which is just north of Florence? Well, some wise person or people in Monash University decided to buy this beautiful piece of real estate just outside of Florence a number of years ago, and they use it for educational purposes. So we're sitting in a very beautiful room that is decked out to be a classroom. And the main auditorium has got an absolutely sensational ceiling if you ever get a chance to look up. Most people are fixated by the data, and there's a lovely courtyard outside bathed in beautiful Italian sunshine.
It is gorgeous and definitely a motivation to make sure you get the meeting. It's invitation only meeting though, right?
It is. It's very much about clinical trials, mainly large pragmatic randomized controlled trials, but they're not all of that, guys. And it is by invitation only, so it's really people who have done or are doing trials combined with communicators. That's why TopMedTalk is here, along with some editors-in-chiefs of various different journals.
Thank you to Paul for having us here. I had the privilege to sit down with some of the presenters and those that were presenting papers that are either getting ready or that have been published and out there, and ones that are kind of in the works. And then some of the other things I think is great. We were talking about some of the studies that are in process or trying to come out.
Yes, we have the full spectrum. So we've been privileged to see some results that are embargoed. So we know the answer to some of the very large trials that have been done. On the first morning, there was trials presented that in total went over 10,000 patients, which is fantastic opportunity. That's all embargoed, so we're on all of that. But the other thing is people either tell you that trials that are ongoing, so they're trying to attract new centres, or things that are they're trying to test the idea on the audience, or they're saying this is going to start soon.
That's great. Well, we've had the opportunity to sit down with one of the participants here and presenters, Ben Creagh-Brown, who's a consultant in intensive care medicine at the Royal Surrey County Hospital in Guildford. From the UK, Ben, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. You've described it very well. It's an amazing opportunity to come, and I was lucky enough to come a couple of years ago and enjoy Prato then, and I was really pleased to be asked to speak and tell everyone about my squeeze study today. So
it's interesting whenever we saw that you're going to be here and talking about squeeze. We were just at the ESA, the European Society of Anesthesiology, Euro Anesthesia 19 meeting, and we were talking to Konstantin Bolanov, who is an avid listener of TopMedTalk. We met him this past winter and just had the opportunity to sit down with him, and he started telling us about the squeeze project that you're working on. You're the PI for that, correct?
So Konstantin's our national coordinator for North America, for the USA. And I'm one of the co-chief investigators for the squeeze study, myself and Ib Jammer, who's from Bergen in Norway. And we have a study coordinating team, including Hannah Wunsch from Canada, Ramli Moonsinger from London, Louis Fournier from London, and Peter Martins, our statistician, also from London. So, yeah.
Can you tell us just a little bit about the study, the premise for it, and just kind of dive into that?
Sure, no problem. So I'm an intensivist. I work on an ICU that's predominantly surgical, so I see a lot of post-op patients. And the problem with post-op vasopressor infusions is really, really common, or certainly that's what we thought, and it's not really ever been described. So it's something most intensivists come across on a routine basis, but there's almost nothing in the literature about it. So I presented this idea to Ib and a few colleagues at the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine. They have a perioperative intensive care section meeting. So people like the idea. So we set about applying, sort of designing what would be an observational cohort study. And we applied to ESA. They have the European Society of Anaesthesiology have this clinical trials network, and you can apply for grants. We applied for a grant from them, and we were delighted that they were keen on the idea. So we went along about a year ago to Copenhagen to start telling people about it. And over the last year, we've been designing and refining exactly what we're going to do. But it's all about post-op vasopressor infusion infusions.
So what specifically about the infusions? Did you say problems with that, or I don't think I missed it?
So it's a common clinical problem that's never really been described, and we thought that probably anecdotally felt there'd be some variation in how commonly places or clinicians do this. Patients who have post-op hypotension, initially they'll be managed with fluids to make sure they're not hypovolemic. But then after that, if they're still hypotensive, you've got to think about why. And in some cases, patients put on vasopressors, either little boluses or infusions. So we thought there was a big variation in practice. So we got permission from Rupert Pearce and the USOS investigators to do a secondary analysis of the USOS database. And we found that our rough guess that it was about 2% of patients was approximately correct. It was about 2.7% of patients in USOS either had a vasopressor or an inotrope infusion in the first 24 hours. But more importantly than that, there was huge variation between countries. Some countries 6%, some countries 0%. So that really shows that we don't really know what the right thing to do is. So with that in mind, we sort of designed this study, which is really just describing a problem, or not necessarily a problem, but something that happens with a view to potentially using that data to design interventional trials that could look at post-operative fluids and vasopressors and monitoring.
Monty, what have you, after hearing a little bit about it, what are your thoughts?
First of all, congratulations. I think it's a great idea. And you say this methodology, this descriptive methodology, has been used in the past both to inform us and has often led on to more substantial clinical trials afterwards. Now, I note that you say that when you look at the previous large data set that was available, it was about on average 2%. But as you said, with a very, very large spectrum, one country 0% up to going into the teens, I think. Was that right?
It was a bit less than that. So some countries it was 0%, and the highest was sort of 6 to 7%.
My question when it comes out is going to relate to what the right number is. And I think what you're going to be able to tell us is what's going on. You're not going to be able to tell us what's right or wrong.
That's correct. So it's a limitation of the study. It's just really describing what is done. So each hospital will have a PI, and they'll have a team of people collecting data. And for patients who receive vasopressor infusions, there'll be a little box on the case report form, the CRF, that says, how did you decide that this patient needed a vasopressor infusion, and a range of choices. And I think that's going to be really interesting. And it was actually the statistician who suggested we collect that data, because we'll be able to see if that, to some extent, or to what extent that accounts for the variation in how people do things.
But is it all types of surgery, or is it major non-cardiac? Are there some variations here?
Yeah, so we're avoiding cardiac surgery because that's a whole different kettle of fish and really much more complicated. We're also avoiding obstetric surgery and transplant surgery, and there's a few other sort of minor details. But yeah, and we're also avoiding day case surgery. So it's sort of inpatient surgery in adults. So a really broad selection of patients, and we think approximately 2% of those patients will end up on a post-op vasopressor infusion.
So how is recruitment going right now?
I haven't done a study like this before, but we have got people on the team who've done studies like this before, and we take advice from other experienced investigators, and we've been told that it takes some countries a long time to get their governance arrangements in gear and their ethics. And so far, we've got 62 countries interested in participating. So we're actually giving them a whole year from now to get themselves organised, and then we'll start to recruit. Recruitment's in 2 phases. So it's 1 week of intense activity, trying to pretty much get everybody who comes through your hospital having surgery and meeting those criteria. And we're going to collect a lot of data, and approximately 98% of those patients won't have post-op vasopressor infusions, but we need that data to work out what are the predictors of post-op vasopressor infusions. You could hypothesize it's going to be pretty obvious, but no one's ever done it, so we don't know. But I'm sure neuraxial blockade and bleeding will be factors, but there'll be other things that we might not expect. And when each centre has recruited that big sort of busy activity, then they can take a little bit of a breath, but they continue to look out for patients who receive post-op vasopressor infusions for really until they have 30 patients or a year has passed. And so that way we manage to look at predictors of post-op vasopressor infusions, but we also get a larger cohort of patients who have post-op vasopressor infusions. And we expect some patients will have sort of low dose for a few hours of maybe phenylephrine, others maybe on noradrenaline and vasopressin for days. And so we're going to get a whole spectrum of severity.
That's very cool. So, Ben, you were saying that there is a website for Squeeze, and so can you give us more information on that so if somebody's interested in participating?
We don't yet have an easy-to-remember URL for the Squeeze website, but if you type in ESA Squeeze study or trial, then it'll probably come up. up. We are on Twitter, which is at Squeeze Study, and Ib and I spend a lot of time looking after that.
So you're looking for centres to join in? Is that a key message to get at the end of this? Is if anyone's interested, go via that route and put their hand up?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, so we are keen to have more countries. We are keen to have more centres in those countries. It's a good study for trainees to get involved with, and it should be really quite straightforward. We've made the case report form as short and succinct as possible, sort of data that we need to know to answer our research questions, not data that's just nice to know. So it should be quite, it's going to be quite busy during the week, but it should be doable, and pretty much any hospital should be able to participate.
And I'm assuming there's waiver of consent in the whole thing, so that it should be very achievable.
So we haven't done it yet. We hope so. Obviously, Ramley Moonsinger is on our study coordinating team, and she's got experience of that sort of arrangement. So we are hoping to have waiver of individual patient consent. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's fantastic, Ben. Thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing that information, because I think that definitely people are going to be interested in hearing more about the study, and hopefully recruitment's going to go well for you. The whole process is going to go well for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really pleased that people are interested in my study idea. Thank you.
Cheers.
TopMedTalk.
Nick Majerison here. Thanks for listening to TopMedTalk. Now, before we let you go, it's important that we remind you to subscribe to TopMedTalk. That way you'll never, ever miss another episode. Also, if we could encourage you to join us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, pretty much every single social media platform, we're there. Join us. And finally, check out TopMedTalk.com. If you go to our website, you can subscribe to email updates. That way we can always tell you where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing, and how you can join us. TopMedTalk.com, and click on the section marked email updates. Finally, TopMedTalk is proud to act as the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about them as well. ebpom.org is their website. That's ebpom.org. And if you go to ebpom.org/meetings, you can find out about some of the wonderful meetings that we attend and cover across the year here on TopMedTalk. That's ebpom.org/meetings.